Sevinç is a courageous journalist from Azerbaijan. Sevinç was abroad when her colleague Ulvi was detained, and she knew that she was going to be detained as well. But despite, she just preferred to go to the country and be next to her colleagues.
Mən Ülvini içəridə qoyub, özüm qıraqda rahat həyat yaşaya bilmərəm. Zindan olar mənim o həyat. Başa düşürsən?
Since November 2023, about 20 journalists has been detained from different media organizations in Azerbaijan. Critical and independent journalists focused on corruption investigations. They know what expects them. We are somehow prepared.
Mən o ləngitmədə nə qədər dost itirmişəm. Mən istəmirəm ki, mənim dostlarım da o ləngitmədə məni itirsin.
I think that the situation in Azerbaijan is so desperate that if we stop as well, we will lose everything. We haven't lost everything right now, but we will lose if we stop, and it would be a bad example for the next generation. Nargiz is imprisoned simply for speaking the truth.
Nargiz! Nargiz!
She is one of the several brave journalists of Abzas Media in Azerbaijani jail. Nargiz, she is known for her powerful reporting on protests against pollution from a gold mine in the country. Gold from this mine powers companies like Apple, Microsoft, HP and Tesla. For them, it is a profitable deal. But for the people near the mine, it has been a disaster. They complain that drinking water is contaminated and putting their health and way of life at risk. Nargiz covered this protest, giving locals a voice so their truth couldn't be silenced. In December 2023, Nargiz was arrested, likely because of her fearless reporting. Now this year, Azerbaijan is set to lead the COP29 climate summit in November, but Nargiz won't be able to participate. Together with her colleagues, she faces up to 12 years in prison. Ensure that Nargiz's voice is not silenced by demanding her release.
Hello, my name is Andrea Prasso, and I'm the Executive Director of Freedom Now, one of the many organizations that has come together to demand rights at COP. And I am not at COP. Some of you are joining us today from COP in Baku, while others are also not at COP. Like the people in the video you've just seen, countless journalists, activists, ordinary Azerbaijanis, and people concerned about climate change and human rights worldwide are not at COP. Truly rights-respecting climate action requires robust civil society participation. Yet by holding COP in an authoritarian country, the third time in a row, the UNFCCC has all but guaranteed that civil society will not be adequately represented. Independent civil society is diverse. Its many actors don't always agree. But we must hold space for passionate arguments about issues that matter deeply to each of us, to our communities, and to our planet. We hope that here today we can experience in some small measure what true dialogue regarding the climate crisis and human rights should look like. We have a rich panel with a range of views and experiences and some creative ideas about how we can improve things. But first we'll hear from one more person who wasn't able to join us live today, but was eager to contribute. Michel Forst is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders. Let's hear from him now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this very important event today. I am currently in Baku for COP29, unlike many defenders who are not able to be there, either because they were not allowed to, or simply because they had to make this choice for security or safety reasons, or yet again because they have been unlawfully imprisoned for speaking up against governments, like it seemed to be the case for Anar Mamadi that you all know too well. Throughout the world, environmental defenders already face too many critical issues, from defamation campaigns to legal harassment and even killings. And it is for me really irresponsible and unacceptable to deprive all of them from the possibility to participate in relevant forum and to expose them to further security risks by organizing COPs in countries where the right to defend human rights is perceived as a threat to public order, in countries where human rights defenders, including environmental defenders, are portrayed as criminals. Dear friends, the safe participation of environmental defenders cannot be guaranteed without a strong civic space, even in UN-led international spaces like the COPs. Environmental and climate change issues are human rights issues, and they can be addressed without a strong human rights-based approach. And to be effective, just, and to be inclusive, the climate action that world leaders discuss in spaces such as COP29 need to place human rights at the center. And for that, we need to ensure that those who stand for human rights and for the environment can do it safely, either at home or abroad. We also need to ensure that those who stand for these rights can be present and vocal in these international spaces without fear of reprisals. With that in mind, I would like to take the possibility of my intervention today to renew several of my calls. Firstly, I call on the international community to stand with environmental defenders wherever they may be. Secondly, I call on global leaders and especially on delegations of the 46 states and the EU that are parties to the Arhus Convention to demonstrate leadership for the protection of environmental defenders and for the promotion of their safe participation in this COP, as well as in international forum relating to the environment. This is a simple call to respect their binding obligations under the Arhus Convention. Finally, I urge the Azerbaijani authorities to allow me to visit Anar Mamadi in prison while I am in Baku. And I urge them to immediately release him from the pre-trial detention and to drop all charges against him. I urge them to cease any form of harassment against environmental defenders and critics and to immediately and unconditionally release those in arbitrary detention. And beyond these calls to governments, I would like to end my message with a long thought for all defenders who over the years have had to deal with the crisis for their engagement with the UN, and with a particular thought for all those who could not be at COP this year. I would like to pass on a message to those who may be attending this event and listening to my statement. To all environmental defenders, I want to say, you are not alone. Thank you very much.
Well, every event has to have one technical difficulty. Hopefully that was ours for this and will be good for the rest of it. So now we're going to turn to our panelists. Welcome and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to ask each of you to make some brief opening remarks. Please try to keep it to about 3 minutes because we have so many wonderful people to hear from. And then we'll open this up to a discussion with all of our participants who are joining us from cities around the world. And let me welcome and thank all of you for being here as well. We really hope you'll actively participate in this discussion. As I said, this is supposed to be, if we were at COP, the kind of robust, free-flowing conversation that we could have. So we're doing this as well as we can. We hope you'll participate by doing live posting on social media if you'd like. You can use the hashtag demand rights at COP, hashtag COP29, hashtag human rights, hashtag freedom, hashtag free political prisoners, whatever hashtags you've been using as well, hashtag Aliyah free them all. So please feel free to use those. You can use the demand rights at COP.org website We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. If you have questions, please submit them for our Q&A session. If you would like to just type your question, that's fine. And then the moderator, the questions will be sent through to us. If you would like the opportunity to say your question, either just verbally or also on camera, when you type your question, if you can put in square brackets, live spoken or live video before your question, that will give us a cue. If this is too confusing, don't worry about it. When we turn to the Q&A, we will revisit it. But please know we want to hear from all of you. So first, I'm going to turn to our panelists, in particular from 3 members of Azerbaijani civil society who are currently living in exile because of the risks that they faced in Azerbaijan. Today, they are joining us from Berlin. Samat Rahimli is an Azerbaijani human rights lawyer and representative of the ITR campaign, a joint advocacy campaign focused on the case against 3 Azerbaijani civil society organizations, the Institute for Democratic Initiatives, Toplum TV, and the Third Republic platform. Ibad Bayramov is one of the children of wrongfully detained academic and activist Dr. Gubad Ibadoglu. Ibad and his family have been fighting for Dr. Ibadoglu's release. And Aytan Bardova is an Azerbaijani investigative journalist formerly associated with Meydan TV. Samat, let's turn to you first.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to give assessment of our case. I mainly focus on, as you suggested, Andrea, we have so many, we have so many problems regarding human rights problems. Just a minute. Okay. We have so many problems regarding this crackdown, and I would like mainly focus on our case and in general context, and secondly, problems of legal profession that currently who engage in defending these people. So first thing is that what about what kind of crackdown happened against us? IDI is one of the Azerbaijani civil society organizations mainly engaged in election monitoring, research and reporting, and also legal assistance. So we are IDI is a post-2014 civil society in Azerbaijan. IDI tried to rebuild Azerbaijan civil society since 2014. But also Toplum TV, besides Abzas, Kanal 13, Meydan TV, are one of the critical media organizations in Azerbaijan and try to create alternative space for alternative voices in Azerbaijan, and they are also targeted. And Third Republic platform is a novel political opposition movement in Azerbaijan, mainly focused on decentralization, decentralized democracy, and rule of law, dedicated on these issues. And these all 3 organizations targeted, but these organizations are not the main target here. Slowly, others also targeted, critical media, political opposition, and also civil society organization. So Azerbaijani government now intends to shut down all critical public space in Azerbaijan and want to destroy it. It's not only about individuals, around more than 300 people. Besides this, many people who are in Azerbaijan who engage in civil society, critical media, political opposition is now under travel ban, and they are in the waitlist list, but they are potential defendants. So in a nutshell, it's a different kind of repression crackdown in Azerbaijan. The previous repressions mainly focused on to silence people in some segments or to cheat some activities. But right now, the repression has one aim: to destroy, to annihilate critical public space. So that's it. They want to close the game. So that's why we need much more comprehensive solidarity from international community to continue fight on Azerbaijani cause, because Azerbaijani cause is not different from Georgian, not from different from Ukrainian, Russian, or Belarusian cases. We are part of Eastern European problem, democracy problem, and that's why we are fighting in united front against authoritarian regimes. That's I would like to mention there are so many names who are targeted, but I would like to mention two of them, two emblematic names. One is Akif Gurbanov. He's a former chairperson of the IDI and also current speaker of the Third Republic platform. He has outstanding civil society record, which he wanted to turn to political base, new political opportunities, and he was targeted. But also, I would like to mention the name of Anar Mehmetli, as you all know, that he arrested in 2014, but didn't stop his activities and continued in post 2014 period his activities, and again he was targeted. So we can see that there's no difference for Azerbaijani government. They are eager to target all of us, all kind of affiliations. And in a nutshell, that legal profession right now, we are under very hard pressure. Lawyers engaged in these cases faces different kind of reprisals. So there were so many disbarments in previous years, and also the lawyers like me who weren't the bar member and who intended to become bar member. We weren't admitted to the bar because of our positions. And right now we have also access to prisons problem regarding lawyers. There are communications are intercepted, and there are problems regarding to prompt access to defendants. And also the threats continue against the lawyers, and they want to target the legal profession either. And many lawyers in Azerbaijan who are bar members, they don't want to take these cases because they're afraid. So it's a Soviet-style repression in a post-Soviet era, and all of this done is by the government, who has close cooperation with Western countries and financial interests in the Western countries.
Thank you, Samat. That was a really excellent summary, although a little bit depressing. And, you know, we mentioned the prisoners. As we know, there are around 300 political prisoners in Azerbaijan, as well as these emanating circles of repression. There are many people who are being actively repressed, who are not in detention. There are people who were formerly in detention, like Dr. Ibadoglu. Ibad, can you tell us a little bit about your family's advocacy on behalf of your father, what he was doing before he was detained, and a little bit about what it's like to be a young human rights defender, young Azerbaijani human rights defender right now?
Thank you, and thank you for letting me talk today. Well, my father has been in house arrest since April 2024, but there hasn't been much help when it comes to his health condition. He still faces a grave danger to his health, and he's at the risk of heart attack, which could be triggered anytime. Despite that, we haven't seen any action from the government side. We've been shouting that we need to get him under surgery. We need to get him under surgery in another country where he could safely have this process. But the government has so far ignored all our tries. But there are many reasons, I could say, why he's imprisoned. But one of them could be the fact that it was a part of a bigger crackdown right before COP29, considering that his main areas was corruption and natural resources. Apart from being a scholar at the universities where he constantly raised the issues about Azerbaijan economic situation and the corruption, he also used his platforms to raise the problem about the natural resources. You could see that from one of his latest articles in the London School of Economics and Political Science right before his imprisonment, which is the economics of petro-auto-totalitarian countries, which was published in a very famous resources policy journal. Apart from that, he has also published a lot of articles mentioning that the Azerbaijan government is not able to supply the demand at home while exporting the natural gas to Europe. and therefore they might have to buy gas from Russia, which today we see that is happening. Azerbaijan government has announced that officially they are buying gas in order to supply the demand at home, which he said that before his imprisonment, and that was one of the reasons. That was part of many reasons that Azerbaijan government was so keen to imprison him. We, as a family, have been running around, doing as much as possible in order to raise his case, in order to raise his voice, in order to see our father at least one more time, in order to make sure that Azerbaijan government does not keep him as a hostage in the country forever, and does not basically lead to his death due to the grave danger to his health that he's facing right now. We've been running in the European Parliament, in Germany, in the UK, in the USA, in many parts of the world, in fact, in order to get our voices heard. We have seen how this has been helpful in terms of raising his case before COP29, but the fact still remains the same, that he's in Azerbaijan, trapped in house arrest, and not able to leave the country, and I'm not able to see him. And I'm also not able to go back to Azerbaijan because it's not guaranteed what the Azerbaijan government would decide to do with me. And therefore, I'm not able to see him. We haven't met for nearly 2 years now. We will continue, obviously, as a family, to raise his case, to make sure that we get to that day where we are able to basically meet him and see him, and he gets the treatment that he requires, he desperately requires. So that's our goal, and we will continue to raise his case in order to make sure that he can get the medical treatment and the freedom that he deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibad. Aytan, you're an Azerbaijani investigative journalist. You used to be with Meydan TV, which operates in exile. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is like for Azerbaijani journalists now and what the media environment is like in general? Of course, many of us have seen international reporting out of COP29 this week. Are local reporters there? What can the local and regional population expect?
It's it's mainly, you may felt from my screen, like I I hate everything about me. I am Aytan Farhadova from Azerbaijan, and thanks for this event because for civil society and Azerbaijan journalists, it's like needable because as we shut down in Azerbaijan, mainly Azerbaijan government may work abroad also. When I left Azerbaijan in 2019, after a year, I think it's revealed that the Azerbaijan government buys surveillance new technology of Pegasus, and this surveillance many journalists, many civil society members, many one of years now in this event faced with this. And to be a journalist exile, it's like I couldn't. It has own difficulties to be exiled, to work in exile, because Georgia is not far from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan government may interference even the Georgian election here, and that's why mainly working regarding COP29 in Azerbaijan. Mainly, I may work only in that stage, that with the documents, like, or with the persons who I should hide their names. Like we are working with invisible persons, and now it seems like will be difficult after COP29 too. Like Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijan journalism, like Azerbaijan journals has many problems. If you are stay in the country, you have another problems, or if you left the country, it's bring you another problems. Like in Azerbaijan, as Today I prepared one article about the Meydan TV journalists. Two journalists from Meydan TV tried to attend to the like COP29, but the organization denied this for them because they should they should add the last 4 months articles or materials regarding journalist materials, but journalists in Azerbaijan, Meydan TV journalists, they work like without signature, because we couldn't identify the gender, even gender, and it's another problem. And when a journalist in exile, they have many problems, and one of them is with the documents. And because and we have now that problems. It's easy for government like authoritarian government like Azerbaijan to demand these journalists from the host country, and now now to say like Azerbaijan journalists stay in Azerbaijan, it's insecure, or left Azerbaijan maybe insecure. It's I couldn't say that. And for Azerbaijan government detain journalists, and another case is flexible the legacies. How Azerbaijan government made the laws flexible and may it's give another chance.
I think we may have
The
just
Azerbaijan
lost.
government to detain journalists. So it me or sorry. As we saw at second day of the COP29, how aide of president spoke about that the Azerbaijan journalists broke the law, but we know which law the conversation going on, and we know that, but I don't know. Like we will demand for last ones, but. We need, as Samad Rahimli mentioned, we really need the support from the abroad, and as because we feel like fuel fossil, or may say oil and gas, the governments like EU governments, it's not it shouldn't stay over human rights. If I explain my my opinion correctly, I don't know, but we feel it like journalists from in Azerbaijan from 2014, when Azerbaijan government decided to change the legacies, NGOs, and about NGOs, about the grants, about the media. And from that time, we feel it like human rights, not the first, and we need support for change this opinion.
Thank you so much, Aytan. Yes, you were very clear. Again, also depressing, which will be a theme for today, but very clear. Thank you. Now we're going to go to London, where we'll hear from Louis Wilson. Louis is an investigative journalist who until recently led investigations at the international NGO Global Witness. He just published a report called COP29 is for Oil Deals, which reveals how the Azerbaijani petrostate used its position as the host of COP29 to facilitate discussions of new fossil fuel deals. Louis, please tell us what you found.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks to everyone who's spoken so far, and really setting out the stakes of the conversation here. So our investigation that was published last week, just as COP started, was the result of a months-long undercover look at the COP29 team. So we posed as a fake investor and approached the COP29 team with some pretty outlandish requests, and they were all too happy to deliver on all of them. So we were granted access right to the heart of the COP29 team, the chief exec of the talks, Elnur Sultanov, who is also Azerbaijan's deputy energy minister, was falling over himself on camera to facilitate fossil fuel deals for this fake investor. And the only conclusion you can draw is that clearly a succession of petrostates and fossil fuel lobbyists have completely destroyed any guardrails that were protecting global climate policy making from corporate interests and from petrostates. And it does connect to human rights. This is a human rights issue, of course, as we've already heard. But you can see that in the issues with press freedom. So Azerbaijan responded to this investigation with very threatening overtures. The parliament met to condemn our work because in the Azeri government's mind, there is no free press, right? So they see this as part of a Western operation against the government, notwithstanding that they haven't been able to refute any of the allegations. And of course, you know, we are extremely privileged from outside Azerbaijan to be able to publish critical materials like this without facing arrest. Of course, as we've heard, others do not have that privilege, and many brave people currently detained in Azerbaijan for doing exactly that. So, you know, these issues are all interconnected, and you can see that fossil fuels are so intrinsically connected to authoritarianism. I mean, especially in Baku, especially in Azerbaijan, where the regime depends on these fossil fuels for its power and sees climate action as an existential threat. Any kind of climate action is an existential threat, and it relies on these fossil fuel revenues for its aggression against Armenia, for the repression that it wields over its own citizens as well. So yeah, there will be no progress on climate issues without progress on human rights, because they are so, you know, the interests of these petrostates are so fundamentally opposed to them. So, you know, without freeing up space for civil society, space for journalists in places like Azerbaijan, I firmly believe there'll be no meaningful progress on climate.
Thank you for that. You've drawn out, you know, some of the connections to other COPs, because of course we're here today to talk about what's happening or not happening in Baku, but it is one of many of these events. As I mentioned at the outset, this is the third authoritarian host in an environment where there are political prisoners, severely restricted civil society, the second petrostate in a row to host COP. And of course, the next event will be in Brazil, which has a different set of issues, indigenous rights in particular. And so we can see some of these continuing if we don't address these issues that we're discussing here today in the Azerbaijani context. We will see them replicated and, you know, potentially even worse in the future. Speaking of being at COP, I'd like to turn to Ben Linden from Amnesty International, who is at COP right now. He's the Advocacy Director for Europe and Central Asia at Amnesty International USA, and he will tell us a little bit about what he's been seeing as an official badge holder at COP. Ben?
Thanks so much, Andrea. Apologies in advance for any background noise or connectivity issues. I am in the blue zone at Baku Stadium. And I'll just kind of maybe start by setting the scene. First off, if you accept the exorbitant lodging and food prices, which, to be clear, for many are a barrier to entry for organizations and individuals who would like to be here. Otherwise, the logistics are well run. There are shuttles that carry thousands of delegates across the city. They're greeted at Baku Stadium by really an army of volunteers, all clad in green. And I think these volunteers are quite heroic, directing foot traffic, lightly answering about 1 million questions per minute. And we have, of course, the blue zone administered by the UN, where most of the negotiations and other actions happen, where there's plenaries, plus press conferences, side events, pavilions set up by member states. There's also a green zone. There's also a green zone administered by the host country with an expo pavilion for businesses and foundations, as well as several flashy pavilions dedicated to green projects taking place across the host country. in terms of civil society participation, there is international civil society that's well represented and are working tirelessly for climate justice demands, including in the realms of climate finance, the new collective quantified goal on finance, a full, fast, fair, and funded fossil fuel phase-out across all sectors based on grants, not loans, and development of human rights compliant, nationally determined contributions to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. International activists have undertaken actions in support of these objectives, including demonstrations within the Blue Zone in line with the host country agreement. Within the Green Zone, there are government-supported NGOs that do have a pavilion alongside international businesses and foundations. That brings us to what's missing, which, of course, is indigenous and local civil society from the host country. I'm certainly grateful to be here and feel privileged to be here as a member of a large international human rights organization, but I can't help but notice the irony of those that are most able to help move the host country in the right direction, the ones that are working tirelessly to shed light on shortcomings in environmental policy, on cases of corruption, and so on, are prevented from participating. Some of them, as we've heard, are first forced to work from abroad. Others have been detained or otherwise persecuted, like Dr. Ibadoglu, like human rights defender Anar Mamadli, like journalist Nargiz, and dozens of others. And to be clear, this undermines the process and taints the outcomes of whatever those outcomes are from COP29. And so Amnesty International has called on all states attending COP29 to demand that the host country authorities end reprisals and immediately release all of those imprisoned for their human rights work or for criticisms of the authority. So I'll stop there and want to thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and for everyone who's joined to raise attention on these critical concerns.
Thank you so much, Ben. And I'll just note that on Tuesday, there is a human rights side event taking place in Baku at COP29. One of the reasons we wanted to make sure we held this event today is so that people like Ben and others can carry forward some of our messages to that event, the sort of official opportunity to have human rights issues raised, though of course we all believe they should be deeply, deeply integrated into the discussions. We've heard about the severity of the crackdown on human rights activists, human rights defenders, journalists, and some of the corruption in the Azerbaijani state that is deeply linked to both repression and to climate harm. Recently, a group of Azerbaijani and international advocates met to discuss what they think are the most pressing issues and how they feel the international community should engage. As we've discussed, the situation is so dangerous that many of those with the most relevant information for these conversations can't risk being publicly identified. Today, we have Arzu Gebula, who herself is an Azerbaijani journalist living in exile, who attended these conversations and will share with us some of the key takeaways. Arzu?
Thank you. I guess also before I just share some of those takeaways, I would like to make a few additional points to what has already been mentioned about the overall context. One thing to remind the audience is that, this crackdown isn't the first time. We're not seeing this for the first time. Crackdowns have been cyclical in Azerbaijan, and the government of Azerbaijan has a pretty poor track record when it comes to human rights, when it comes to freedoms, when it comes to civil society being able to work freely and independently. We are also dealing with the same government, which has been able to get away with all of that crackdown that we've been documenting for over years. And I guess hosting COP29 was emblematic of just how often and how easily the government of Azerbaijan gets away. Here again, hosting one of the most important international conferences on climate. And one other perhaps point to the broader context of the crackdown, Samad really well described the intention of the government. But I think it's also really important to mention the charges that are being leveled against these groups, because it's not just the diversity of the people who are being targeted, also the diversity of charges, right? We've seen smuggling being brought up the most, but also there are very serious charges of treason, like in the case of two young scholars, Bahru Samarov and Iqbal Abilov, who are facing up to 20 years if they're found guilty. And the treason charges coming at a time when the government of Azerbaijan is discussing a peace deal with Armenia is also quite ironic. Now, to some of the takeaways of from the discussion that has taken place, I'm just going to go through the list and try to be really brief. The community is calling for, of course, for the support of the civil society in exile. One of the messages delivered was, we don't need political gambling, we need concrete political engagement. That the community is asking for physical support that includes humanitarian visas, something that a lot of the members of the community struggle with prior to actually attempting to leave the country. Relocation support, of course, in addition to the humanitarian visas, guarantees of physical security for those in exile. There is a growing sense of fear among members of the exiled community that their lives are in danger, given repeated attacks against already exiled activists that we've been seeing in the reports coming our way. They're also calling on all stakeholder government, non-governmental organizations, as well as international non-governmental organizations and donor organizations to establish a long-term working mechanism on Azerbaijan, because this crackdown that we're documenting, that we're witnessing, that we have been documenting over the past year, is meant to completely silence independent voices, and therefore it does not look like things are going to change once COP is over, and there will be any significant shift in the way the government and the authorities perceive civic groups. And in addition, I think a few other points to make of some of the messages that were shared, some of the concerns that were shared in that meeting, and they are focused on the well-being of the exiled community. They're feeling overstretched, overwhelmed with the amount of work that falls on their shoulders. There is also a lack of solidarity, and this was mentioned by a number of community members. Really kind of explaining that when you have only a handful of supporters trying to mitigate the current situation, it really creates additional difficulty both for the existing organizations that are providing help, but also on the members of the community, because everything needs to be balanced out and whatnot. There's also within that sort of message, there was a need to expand on groups and organizations working on Azerbaijan, as their numbers are currently small, as I mentioned. And one message on political prisoners and calling for their release publicly, privately, of course, in meetings where possible. There are over 300 political prisoners in this country at the moment. And so it is really important to call collectively for their release rather than focusing on individual names and people. I think that's about it from the main takeaways, and I'm happy to elaborate more if there are any questions down the line. Thanks.
Thank you, Arzu. I'm sure there will be more questions, and I really want to thank you for being able to elevate the voices of those who could not be here. Hopefully the next time we have a gathering like this, they will be able to be. Now we're going to turn to Lena Schilling. Lena is the Austrian member of the European Parliament and a climate activist herself. She will be part of the European Parliament delegation going to COP in Baku next week, where we hope she'll deliver some of the messages that she's heard today. We've heard from a tremendous number of activists, a range of views, and now we'd like to turn to you, Lena, to talk a little bit about what are some of these actions that the international community has taken and can take. How do we move forward to actually realize these demands that people are calling for? So over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you for being here and also telling what's needed. And I think that's a very important point, to bring all those things you said right there into the COP resolution and also the discussions, that what I did. So we negotiated a resolution from the European Parliament where we had a clear position in Azerbaijan. And I think that's very important. And the first thing I actually want to do is thank all of you for your work. It's incredible to see what kind of work you're doing, and I can imagine how exhausting it must be. So thank you so much. I started as a climate activist when I was 16, and now I'm the youngest member of the European Parliament, and I still feel very connected to the climate movement. And climate movement means climate activists everywhere, especially in countries where there is a lot of repression, especially in countries where people cannot just protest and say what's needed. So me going there, it was a really hard decision, but I decided to do it to bring all those messages there. In preparation, we, together with Amnesty International, thank you also for being here today, we wrote a letter to the Minister of Justice, because of course we asked publicly a lot of times for the release of all the political prisoners. And that's what we are continuing to do. And at the same time, to visit free people in prison and in house arrest that are already been mentioned. So of course, Dr. Gubat Ibagdoglu, this is a case we bring up in the European Parliament constantly for over months. Also, because of your great sister, I have to say, Shala, who is mostly there, and which is very amazing to see. And then Nagis, who is one of the cases I feel mostly connected with. And I have to say that I will try to tell the stories, and not just the singular stories, but many of the stories connected, because I think it's important to give to the public faces and things we have empathy with. And that's what I'm trying to do and willing to do there. And we also asked not just our ministers, but all the people we met, like Commissioner Hökstra and co, that he will address the human rights situation in bilaterals. So that's something we are asking for all the leaders and all the people that negotiate there, because I think one thing has to be clear: there is no climate justice without human rights and social justice. And that's something I'm burning for years, and I'm still am. So yeah, thanks for having me today. I think it's important that the civil society talks. I was very grateful to listen. And if there's anything up, please just write my office. We're still in here. I need to move to the next appointment, but please stay in contact. And if there's anything we can do, tell us. We really try our best. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We're really honored by your presence, and we do appreciate your very busy schedule. So we know you can't join us for the Q&A, but we will be in touch. I'm sure many of us will be. So now we get to turn to the Q&A. We get to hear from all of you. The instructions are in the chat. I can reiterate them pretty briefly, which is to put your questions in the chat, please. If it's important to, if you are able to either speak your question or be on video for your question, you'd like to do that, just indicate in your question you want to do it live spoken or live video, and logistically we can make that happen, or I can read them out to the panel. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat either way, and we will get started. Great. So I have one question I'm going to start with, which I will read, and then I think we have some people who'd like to ask their own questions. The first question being, how can people get involved in this fight and keep the pressure on after COP? That is, I think, honestly, the question of the day. So thank you, whoever asked that. And I'll add additionally to that, how do we continue to support human rights activists in and outside of Azerbaijan, and how do we make this something that carries forward to the next COP, that is a broader global campaign, rather than every year we have to do this again because COP is in a different geography with different activists, different issues. So we have lots of panelists with a lot to say about that. Is there anyone who would like to take their first crack at responding to that? Sama, please.
There, there is one concrete action which Azerbaijani government afraid. It's targeted sanctions. And when they face such kind of threat, they understand that they need take back from some kind of repressive measures. And there are two good examples of this. Ubadi case, partially solved due to threat of sanctions, targeted sanctions. And in 2017, I guess, Mehman Aliyev's case, when US Senate threatened Azerbaijani government to impose targeted sanctions, the officials involved this case. So I believe that based on the restricted resources, the international community, international human rights community, NGOs should take main direction on that, targeted sanctions, and it will help Azerbaijani government, and not only about this should be only not related to releasing some individuals, but also changing policy and legislation. We have NGO legislation, restrictive media legislation, political parties legislation, internet access legislation. All of this legislation, legislative pieces restrict the area of Azerbaijani civil society, political opposition, media, and at the end, we operate in the margin of law, and then they use this pretext against the civil society to charge them in politically motivated cases based on bogus accusations or planted evidence. So the amendments to legislation and change of policy in practice should be also included to agenda, and also targeted sanctions. Officials, including MPs who voted for this legislation, and also the main responsible persons, formally and informally, they should be included in such kind of lists. And this is only effective mechanism that works. But also, Azerbaijan government has interest in financial institutions of the West. I believe that some kind of advocacy regarding financial institutions could be or can be also helpful, because it's about money and it's about their human resource to be targeted.
Thank you. Before we move on, do any of our other panelists want to respond to this question? Okay, let's move on, because we do have, we're going to go a few minutes over to give people a chance to speak. We do have a couple more questions. Amin Husseinov, you have a question you'd like to ask? You should be able to speak in just a moment.
Hi, everyone. I have a maybe a little bit rhetoric questions, because it's about the different campaigns organized by group before COP29. It seems that there was little lack of coordinations, and many didn't support of the efforts of the Azerbaijani NGOs, like some international organizations. I think this contributed to the overall results of the campaigns organized by Azerbaijani exile-based and country-based activists that are not significant enough, and we are not yet visible. Why do you think it's happened? What is supposed to change? Because as most of you remember, during the Eurovision campaign, we are coordinated well with all of you guys, and during this COP29 first year, we see lack of clear lack of coordination, and some international NGOs even not able to sign our petitions, just literally one simple signatures on behalf of organizations or some organizations members, when they say, look, our organization have strong legal rules, but we can join like individually. So it's what we observe today. We have like 80 signed organizations and more than 150 individuals, and we should expect like much more, because like if we see like 3,500 admitted NGOs with the UNFCCC only, and not many of them, like especially international NGOs, sign and support our efforts. And like a parallel, it's like 4 different campaigns, which is, we believe it's good. So we are contributing for single target, but I think it's better if, like, let's say, for even if like 3 or 4 different petitions, everyone supposed to sign, I think, like each petitions, as many petitions, many signatures we have, it's much better for raising more awareness and what is possible to do for next upcoming presidency year, because like
thank you so much. I mean, we are
Azerbaijan
really
supposed to be president of the COP29. Like, I thank you.
Thank you. We are very short on time, but I appreciate that. I'm going to ask Ben if he could respond briefly. I'm going to respond briefly myself, just as the head of an international organization, to say, I think you've raised an incredibly important question that is relevant not only to COP, but to the way that international organizations work with local and regional organizations. It's something that we are all trying to figure out the best way to work in solidarity with each other while also being true to our own mandates. I think that COP presents a really unique challenge, as I mentioned, because it's in a new country, in a new region every year. And I don't have any reason to believe this is intentional, but it's almost as if it's designed to break apart that robust civil society network that is formed each time. So I think it's incumbent on civil society to think a little bit about how we can make sure that those of us here today, will we be active next year when it comes to COP in Brazil? Are the activists who are involved in Egypt and UAE involved here? How do we make this much more global? But that's a question for another day. Ben, I just want to see if you want to respond briefly to this issue of international NGOs working with local NGOs and so on.
Thanks. No, I mean, I couldn't have, I can't really elaborate too much on that. But I fully take it on board, and I mean, would love to kind of continue the conversation with you and figure out how to be, continue to strive for ways to be better advocates and upraise those that are fighting from exile, to raise these important issues. So thank you for raising it, and looking forward to continuing to coordinate with you on those efforts.
Thank you, Ben. Now we will go to another live question from Anar Orozhov. In about 5 seconds, you should have be able to unmute and speak and ask your question. Anar?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hear you. Yes, we
Hello.
can.
Good day. At first, thank you very much for organizing such an important event on the eve of COP, which has already started several days ago in Azerbaijan. And despite of all the human rights problems, I see that the Azerbaijani officials, including the President Aliyev, the advisor of the President Aliyev, they are talking about so openly, like Azerbaijan has their all kind of there is no any kind of human rights related problems. There is no problems with the freedom of expression. I'm presenting here channel 13, which is the one of the targeted under this crackdown media in Azerbaijan. Right now, Aziz Orozhov, the head of our Canal 13's Baku office, and our daily programs moderator are in prison right now. And with some of my colleagues here, Samet Rahimli, Arzu Gaybullah, with Ibat, with Emin, we were always in different advocacy meetings all over the Europe, in different cities, that how to meet with our colleagues in Europe and to make sure that there would be the proper pressure against the Azerbaijani government in order to at least release the political prisoners. As you may know, today, Azerbaijani president met with the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. We hope that in January session, just maybe before the January session, some of the political prisoners could be released. But what will happen if not? So that's the main question, that what can happen if Azerbaijan will be able to get his accreditation in winter session of Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, and none of the political prisoners, most of the political prisoners will not be released in this time. So as my colleague Samet Rahimli here told, that this targeted sanctions is much more influential method, we think, and it could be already in function in order to make the Azerbaijani government feel really what they did with the human rights situation in Azerbaijan, and how bad is the situation, and how ugly the view of Azerbaijan when we look at this country from the abroad, from the Europe. So my main question is about it, that how the international organizations, including the Amnesty, including Freedom Now and others, how you can help us, how you can be with us in order to motivate the politicians in Europe in order to bring to the agenda the sanctions, targeted sanctions against Azerbaijani current political regime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anar. Ben, do you want to respond to that briefly? And I'm happy to as well.
Thank you for that. No, I mean, I would have to honestly interact with our European office, who will be better served to follow that. But I do know for as it relates to sanctions, it's that in particular. Amnesty International, as a membership-driven organization, has to come to consensus or something like consensus majority when it comes to their policy parameters for what they can engage in. And so sanctions is not something we directly are involved with, but we try to use our relationships and our ability to advocate to policymakers, in relevant governments and institutions around the world, to try to raise awareness and use the research that we put out to influence the debate in a positive direction, as so many of our peer groups are doing, and critically, so many of the journalists and activists in exile themselves are doing as well. So we seek to continue to raise up those voices and work with you from there. But I will follow up with our European institutions office to get more for you on that specific question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And Arzu, as someone who has also worked closely with international organizations and been involved in advocacy, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what has already been said. I think we need consistency when it comes to advocacy meetings. My experience and sort of, just the sense is that we often only meet when there is some emergency taking place, or there is a big event coming up, and we try to engage with various stakeholders to, brief them on the situation and see what we can do. But really, I think as I said in my intervention, this crackdown has always been in place. This government has always been in place. It hasn't changed. Its behavior hasn't changed. It has gotten even bolder and far more severe when it comes to its crackdown. So I think, having engagement with relevant stakeholders, and I'm really highlighting the relevancy here because I think our advocacy engagements should only focus and be with those actors who are actually willing to take measures, who are willing to take steps when it comes to dealing with the government of Azerbaijan, whether it's refusing signing new deals, whether it's refusing to sit at the same negotiation tables. I mean, I understand there's a lot of diplomacy and politics involved in these conversations, but really, I think Azerbaijan is one of those countries where we see how diplomacy is failing, how it's failing really to civil society, not only within the country, but also those who have been forced to leave the country and have been trying to continue their work from the outside. So I guess the main sort of point here is consistency, but also not just with any stakeholder, but with stakeholders who are willing to go to really get bolder and respond to the government of Azerbaijan, the way the government of Azerbaijan responds to Western stakeholders. If they can, and I said it recently, that if Azerbaijani government is showing its teeth, I don't see what stops other stakeholders from showing their teeth in return.
Thank you, Arzu. And as this is such an important question, I think I'll just ask if any of our other panelists want to comment or wrap up any final, very, very short concluding remarks, because we are over time. Samat?
Just one. Just one little comment about advocacy and joint advocacy efforts. I hope in the next year we will all come up with good ideas on that and can do much more joint actions. And also, I would like to briefly note that the history of advocacy demonstrates for us that joint actions could bring much more good results. For example, now we have Kubat case. We know that joint action from NGOs helped to raise visibility of this case. And also, for example, unarmamental campaign, the cooperation of the local stakeholders and also international groups helped that boost the awareness on this case. And we need such kind of awareness in other cases also.
Thank you. Ibad?
Yeah, to finish, I would like to add that I think what we have seen prior to COP and leading up to COP in general, the amount of bad PR the Azerbaijan government has received from different NGOs, different journalists, organizations, is a great example that what we could achieve if we put an effort. And I think this gives us an opportunity to basically build upon on it. And we now have chance to basically use these platforms that have been, let's say, build up because of the COP and how much government have attracted attention due to its poor human rights records. And we should use this. We should not basically, we should not abandon this opportunity, and we should try to make sure that all these journalists that have covered Azerbaijan, all these government members that have come to Azerbaijan, all these NGOs that have learned about the current situation in Azerbaijan should not just forget about it. We should try to basically spend time with them and see if they are interested in following it up, see whether any changes happen in the near future. So it gives us a great opportunity, in my opinion, to basically continue raising the case, because COP has really made us to show the world that there is a huge problem with Azerbaijan human rights. Because obviously there were many organizations that knew this, but there were more than that, or more than organizations that knew about this. There was basically so many of them just didn't know about it at all. So I think that's a great opportunity to use. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibad. Aytan, would you like to make any final remarks?
What I want to say, like my as a panelist is added, and I have not any other opinion. Sorry.
Thank you. Louis, any closing remarks?
No, I think I'm feeling inspired after hearing all the good work that's going on, and yeah, look forward to working with you all to try and make some progress.
Thank you. Well, we are over time, which I think we all anticipated would happen, but I wish we had 2 more hours or 2 more days to do this, and I wish we could do it in person. But I really want to thank all of you for being here today. And just on this final point, I think this is a really important point to wrap up on. We want solidarity, not uniformity. And governments demand uniformity from civil society. They want everyone from a country or a region to come to them with the same set of asks, with the same set of concerns, because it's easier for them. And that's not what civil society is. We have a range of views represented on this panel by attendees, by people at COP, by people inside Azerbaijan, by people outside Azerbaijan. I've been a human rights activist for more than 20 years, and I've worked around the world, and governments consistently want civil society, if they even allow it to exist, to conform to their ideas of it. And we don't have to. That's why we're here. We didn't develop a lot of solutions today, in part because we're dealing with really, really difficult problems. But being here right now, having this conversation, I believe is part of the solution. So we are taking the steps that we need to take. There's much more we can do. We can work much more deeply in solidarity. We can communicate better. We can translate some of our messages in ways that are more meaningful to people elsewhere. In no way do I think that we have represented the range of voices through this event today, but we've started and we've tried. And I think that that counts for a lot. So I really want to thank everyone who's attended for taking your time to be here, not at COP or at COP, wherever you may be. And I really want to thank our panelists for contributing today and to the work that you are all doing. Just surviving as an activist or someone who believes in human rights living in exile, that alone is significant. And so many of you also devote your time, your attention, your money, your family life to fighting for others. So thank you for being here today. Certainly from Freedom Now's perspective, this conversation is not over. We look forward to continuing to talk to all of you. And I know many of my panelists feel the same way. So thank you all so much. We look forward to continuing to be in dialogue.